Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
In today's educational environment, students and teachers are juggling a mix of face-to-face, online and blended learning courses. Canvas by Instructure helps teachers navigate these diverse learning experiences with a user-friendly virtual learning environment that offers flexible access to courses and a consistent learning experience, all while streamlining everyday teaching processes. The world's best schools and universities are using Canvas to create dynamic courses, collaborate seamlessly, and access actionable data that drives student success.
Are you looking for lesson planning materials to kickstart the new term? We've got you covered. The Day is a global online resource that turns the news into lessons. We're offering listeners a free resource on Andrew Tate that you can find on thedaynews.co/Tate. Inspire personal development and critical thinking for your students by downloading the Tate Debate today and feel more confident addressing sensitive topics with your class. Visit thedaynews.co/Tate to find out more.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
Hello and good evening.
Hello, Brent. How are you?
Knackered.
Yeah. I think what's happened here is that we're normally not on time, and everyone's surprised we're here.
Well, let's
you
try
were
and
not
be
on
on time.
You were not on time.
We
You
were.
were late.
Oh, Tom, you're such a hard man to please. You are. Right, so tonight, want to look at a couple of things. So I want to look at this idea of mission creep, shall we call it, and teachers brushing teeth. But also the fact that obviously that the schools are asked to do a lot more, but it's disproportionate in areas where there is higher deprivation. So that's the first sort of theme of we want to explore that. And we can't really ignore today that the Progress 8 scores have been released, because there are some interesting scores that you can see that the highest performing school in the country is, again, Michaela Academy, which is controversial as it is, basically because it's led by, a person who is outspoken and controversial in Catherine Burbissing. But the statistics there, the evidence is there. So we'll have a look at, I think, the geography of those Progress 8s and even the school backgrounds of those Progress 8 schools as well. So there's definitely something in that which ties into the other thing that we want to discuss tonight, which is this gap that is opening up, and not only in the sense of class and region in regards to the educational gap, but certainly this widening gap between the different ethnicities. And in particular, there's a pattern developing of white working class students being left further behind, and that's been an issue for a while. But certainly something has happened during COVID that's accentuated that. And there's been a recent study, which is, again, the evidence and statistics are showing that there is a widening gap in attainment, and it's not across the board. I mean, there's certainly the people from South Asian and Asian backgrounds, Chinese backgrounds, are doing well, and there is a definite sort of catching up of other groups like Pakistani, for instance, who have caught up white British groups, but then there's a drop off of white British working class in particular. So we're keen to sort of explore that. And then the third strand of that was a call for more Black British head teachers, because a letter went in from Black head teachers saying, we want more diversity in the classroom, which, more children need, more people they can identify with as role models. And that sparks a conversation of, well, I think we need more teachers, full stop. But is that an issue that we need to resolve as well? The diversity within the teaching profession, and also the lack of diversity within head teachership, which is ironic because I've just said that the top performing Progress 8 school in the country is led by a black British woman, which again, statistics and damn statistics don't always tell the full story, don't they? And that's what you have to be careful of. Statistics can be interesting and they can show patterns, but they don't always tell the intricate stories. The same as the children's successes. There was another story this week that showed that a good head teacher is worth, they reckon, 2 extra grades in 2 separate GCSEs, and they have a value added of that level. So head teachers can add to the value added. And when you sort of add all this together, there's a definite sort of patterns developing of good head teachers, lack of head teachers, funding in some areas, cultural capital, some groups that are doing well in British education systems, some groups that aren't doing well. And it's a very mixed picture, and very much like everything else in society, a postcode lottery possibly between educational outcomes, school success, good trusts, not so good trusts, well-run schools, not so well-run schools, behaviour in some areas. I think there's a lot to be unpicked, so to speak, and obviously we're looking to hear from as many people as possible with different points of view on this, because I'll have my opinions on it. I'll look at the statistics. Adam will have his opinions on it. We can look at the statistics, but we're keen to hear from some diversity in itself and some suggestions, because as a social scientist and a person who has an academic background in economic and social sciences and development, for instance, I've always tried to understand the different levers and pullers which change and change our society, so to speak, and education being one of those things that mirrors what's happening in the wider society. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We'll do it in that order. We'll start with should teachers be brushing teeth? We'll then move into the Progress 8. I think is really good to have a look at the geographical spread, the nature of the schools, and whether we believe in this idea of Progress 8. Is it a crude measurement, or much like the Ofsted criteria, is it how we should be measuring schools?
So I picked up on this story earlier on the week because it kind of it's kind of one of those things that you kind of hear and think, well, it kind of sounds a good idea in one respect, that all children come to one place. If you want to solve a social problem, maybe it can be solved within the teaching profession or in schools, because that's where children go on a regular basis and all one thing. But I could get concerned about policies that come out and are not reflective in kind of the work-life balance and everything else that we're trying to achieve in schools at the minute. We've talked on many occasions about retention issues and workload issues and that type of thing. And it seems like for Keir Starmer to say it, to have it kind of as one of a policy that he announced the other day at the Labour Party conference, that it could be kind of, it's just worrying that it's in a mindset of, well, that's another thing schools can do, and put it onto the school to fix another social problem. In this case, it was dentistry, but it could be a health issue, or it could be any issue that kind of goes on in wider society. So that's the kind of story that I picked up. It'd be really interesting to hear people's views on that as we kind of go through tonight's show, because we're often asked to do lots of things in a school. And I know that me and Brent have talked previously on shows that, we've been asked to be a counsellor, we've been asked to be the pastoral role in particular has grown massively since I started as a teacher, and actually becomes a more and more integral part of my job. But also we're dealing with sometimes we're dealing with some family issues, sometimes we're dealing with the online space, the social media space, and all those other things kind of come into the classroom. And is brushing teeth actually just another thing, could be another thing that kind of pushes some teachers out of the profession and becomes like another workload issue? So it'd be really interesting, particularly if you work in the with younger children, whether you're seeing a decline in their dental hygiene or their dental health, and also, do you think it is the teacher's responsibility to actually start doing this? I mean, I work at the top end, of school, and so sixth form, so I'm kind of a bit distant from the primary school world. But I've had.
Adam, do you have to tell the sixth formers to? I mean, because I work in obviously 11,
Yeah.
16, and we do PHSE lessons on teeth brushing, and I know for a fact that I've had to turn around to some students in Key Stage 3 and say, "Have you brushed your teeth this morning? Have you had your breakfast this morning?"
Yeah.
And quite shockingly, some of the kids happily admit they just rocked out of bed, put their uniform on, and sort of ran out the door.
Well, to be honest with you, I've maybe had to ask a few teachers.
But it goes back to that, isn't it? Because I often get angry when you hear these. What are they teaching at schools? What are they teaching in schools? We used to get that like 15 years ago when teenage pregnancy rates were really high. And I think actually there was a parent a couple of years ago tried to take the school to court for not teaching their child at 13 sex education because they got pregnant. And you're like, hold on a second here. When did we become the complete primary educator? Now, I get myself into trouble in this. Sometimes when I suggest, I'm putting it out there, I am a school. I'm not the primary educator of the children I teach. I shouldn't be the primary educator of the children I teach. And if the children I teach think that I am the only person who educates them, and if the parents that I teach, the children of the parents I teach, think that I am the primary educator of their children, then I think we're in a serious bit of trouble. And I've often said that, says I back up at a parents' evening last night, and that the parents always love parents' evening. Good set of parents that come, they care about their children. I care enough to stay at 6:30 in the evening, and we're all in the same place. We're all on the same page. And they'll often say, "Well, thanks very much for all that you do. Thanks very much for your hard work." And I go, "No, thank you very much for reading your child a bedtime story. Thank you very much for taking the museum. Thank you very much for giving an history, an interest in history." And it's usually I'll get a parent say, "Oh, I really like that subject at school, and I'm really glad my child's doing well." And you sort of see that the massive amount of influence and the cultural capital is passed on, and I'm just backing up what the parents are doing. And I'm backing up what society's doing as well. I'm the backup plan. I'm not the primary plan. If I'm the primary plan, I got 417 students in 5 different subjects in 20 odd periods a week that I see maybe 1 hour a week. Really? That's what you want me to do? That's factory education. I can't do that at secondary. And I know primary is brilliant for the amount of care and attention that they put into to children. But again, is it up to schools to be the primary educator? And I think that's a national debate that we need to have, because too often it's just, what are they teaching at schools? What are they teaching? And an overloaded school curriculum is just piled on more. Andrew Tate, vaping. I mean, we're just basically the dumping ground for every one of society's issues that we just have to resolve, and then be told that we're never good enough, and then we haven't got enough recruitment, retention, not enough TAs, not enough funding. You're like, give us a break, either one or the other. If we are to be the primary educator, then give us a first-class education system. Give us money. Give us the resources to do that. Give us the time. Give us, give us the credit where credit's due. Or are we just what are we now? Just a child minding service where we brush the teeth as well? What's next? We got to feed, clothe, and house each other.
I'm seeing a campaign there for you, Brent, saying "Give us the toothbrushes." That's your slogan for this.
Well, it used to be. Well, still give me the glue stick, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just. I was a governor at a primary school near where we both used to work, and one of the things that we knew that was a problem there was children actually being ready to use the toilets and get themselves ready in the morning. That was a kind of a primary concern for reception children there. And it was a big learning curve for me, because I'd been brought up in a house where that was done. That's what we were doing with our children at the time. You just kind of, in a way, get in a bubble where you presume that is happening in the family. And then again, when you're in these communities, you realise that for lots of reasons, and they are vast, it's not a kind of one issue problem. That's the multifaceted, and it's really difficult to get a hold on kind of what is the kind of problem. When you speak to the parents, they talk to you and they want to do that, but they somehow have got so disconnected that they can't do it, or they're unable to do it, or other things are more precedent in their mind. It could be work, it could be mental health illnesses, it could be they're struggling themselves to get by. And actually, what they want to do is they want to do the primary care, but actually, for some reason, it just seems to slip off their agenda. I think it's really hard sometimes for, quote unquote, middle class parents to understand why that doesn't happen. I think a lot of people just presume it happens. But actually, for some parents, it's very, very challenging. And you've got to remember that a lot of these parents as well have had things like the Sure Start centres taken away from them. And they've had that kind of support network completely ripped away from them over the last 10 years. And, they're then kind of looking at the next stage or the next permanent place where their child is going to maybe support and help them. And that's where
But the thing is, I mean, I accept all that to a certain extent, but then I have to ask the question. I grew up working class. I grew up in a housing estate. I grew up with a dad who's a plasterer and mum's a housewife.
So I know we have this.
But my parents would never, in a million years, expect a school to be brushing the teeth or tying the shoelace. There's an element of kind of, do we have to teach parents how to parent? I mean, and it's going to sound horrible for me to say it, but I do feel sometimes that we have to do parenting classes of like, this is how your child ties his shoelace. You know what I mean? This is how because forgive me for this, but my dad taught me how to ride a bike. Okay, my mum taught me how to do certain things. My grandparents taught me, and both of my sets of my grandparents taught me lots as well. And I think, unfortunately, everybody now just goes straight to the school and says it's the school's responsibility for the children to read and write. Yeah. The school's and I think the government's part of this problem now, because they put the pressure on schools to say the child must be doing this amount of reading, that amount of reading. Well, I'm sorry, but you're right about the Sure Starts. You're right about the amount of libraries closing as well. You're right about even for the youth aspect as well. There's less youth clubs. There's less ownership. It seems to be all on schools. Schools seems to be the kind of all or nothing now. Yeah. And if you are living in an area where you've got a good, well-financed, well-run, well-managed school in an area of cultural capital, you've got some of those things that still exist. You've got, for instance, a parent who can work from home.
Yeah, but this is probably going to get us. I mean, the teeth brushing thing is a kind of Trojan horse, really, into kind of what we're discussing more widely about attainment, class, ethnicity, and obviously kind of wealth/capital are going to be within that as well. But that's kind of, unfortunately, what's happened is their communities have been just left behind, haven't they? And the school system, and in some cases Ofsted itself, has actually escalated that problem because of house prices, because of the link between a good school and house prices. What happens is you end up with these pockets of communities that are just completely left and abandoned, and that's on top of all the deindustrialization stuff as well, and that the stuff that didn't happen after the mines closed. For example, where we used to work, a big area, Stanton Steel, whatever, these large industries just stop or fail or don't exist anymore or are closed down. And then,
but again, Adam, I grew up with 45% unemployment in an ethno conflict, and we didn't have that.
But is that because
there's something? No, there's something about responsibility and pride. It's something about responsibility and pride. My parents would never have me to go to school with my uniform not washed. They would never have me go to school without equipment, even though we didn't have much money. And I had it the other day with a child, and I said, I'm giving you a calculator for the second time. Do you have a mobile phone in your pocket? They hand me a mobile, and there's a £700 mobile phone there. I'm like, hold on a second here. £700 mobile phone. I was wearing a pair of football boots that were 2 sizes too big for me, with 6 pairs of socks on at some stage. Now, I'm exaggerating, but you get the point here. My dad was shopping in the market for my football kit. Yeah. Second hand was the order. I get a little bit tired of this. I get a little bit tired of the excuses sometimes. People have to kind of, I'll be honest with you, they're their children. They're their children. They're their children to be educated. They are their responsibility. And I think, unfortunately, there's been far too much responsibility put on schools. And you're right about Ofsted. We are now expected to do more with less resources, less teaching staff, And should we not do it? We're guilted into it as if we're not doing our job. And I think that's the thing. What is my job as a teacher? What is my responsibility as a teacher? Where does my responsibility as a teacher end? And the child's and the parents? And I think this going to these results. It's exactly this. A child doesn't do well. I'm the fault. The school's at fault. The head teacher's at fault. There's too much of this now. We have to strip it all the way back. And yes, some people have a really hard time of it. Absolutely. But there are many people who have a really hard time of it, and they still send their kids to school properly dressed.
I know, and sometimes we sent we had like a partner school out in the Gambia, and what always amazed me in these, when you kind of the students bring pictures back, or you see videos of the school that was sent in for our pupils to see, is kind of how immaculate these kids were in terms of their uniform being clean, and the kids look kind of groomed, ready for school as well. And sometimes you look across to the kids in your classroom, and you're thinking, what on earth happened there? Because
what we give them a school book, we give them resources. How many times do I give some child pens and they just assume now?
Yeah.
We give them exercise. We give them exercise books. We give them textbooks. We give them resources. We give kids laptops. They just don't appreciate it. They just really. And I'm sounding cranky here. I'm sounding like one of those sort of MPs who wants people to live on a measly amount a day. But there is an element of, I think, people need to, I think, take some ownership and responsibility and support their schools, and certainly say, there almost needs to be the social contract of, and I used to have this where I get the kids' diary, and I'd say to the kids' diary, right, your parents' responsibility is to ensure your homework is done. Your parents' responsibility is to make sure you're sent to school with correct equipment. Your parents' responsibility is to check that you are doing well. Check your data.
But ultimately, what is the consequence here? This is kind of the problem, isn't it? Because we can say that we've done that this year. We've gone really hard. We've gone for the independent stuff, and we've set a kind of whole program. 6 weeks in, a kid doesn't do it. Okay, well, the kid goes through the kind of school consequence system, but then what? Do you mean that's kind of the problem, isn't it?
They don't achieve.
Yes, I know.
But that's the thing.
I know, but what happens is over the course of the whole 5 years, then I presume everyone, like most secondary schools now, you're going through performance management, you're going through these kind of setting objectives and targets. You need to respond to the question, what have you done? And I think a lot.
Oh, I'm already doing that. I'm having my data meetings, and I'm looking at my data going like, my pupil premium students have not done as well. What's going on with my ability this and ability? And I'm going, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to basically be in their life 24/7, remind them that to do their homework? I mean, this is the thing, and it comes down to it. I was intrinsically motivated because my parents, as working class as they were, wanted to get me out of where I grew up.
Yeah.
I wanted education to change my outcome. I needed education. Education was life for me. And as much as I was a little bit disheveled as a kid and I had all my issues and everything else, when it came down to it, there was no negotiation in this. I was going to uni. There was no negotiation in this. My grandparents wouldn't have had it any other way, and they're working class through and through. Absolutely no qualifications. I've looked through my ancestors. My great grandfather was illiterate. I've looked at the history of my family. I mean, we are talking, dirt poor. But the difference is there was a pride in my family, and when we got the opportunity to get to like universities for free or get a free education, that opportunity was not to be missed. It was taken. And when I wasn't doing well at school, my dad took me to the building site, worked me to the bone in the summer when I was 13 years old to say, look, son, you ain't doing this for the rest of your life. You're getting yourself an education. There was a drive, a motivation, a desire of literally, you will do this. You are doing this. There was no negotiation in this whatsoever. And I was surrounded by a community like that who were driven and motivated, and the rest were working class. And I don't know what's going on in England at the moment, but there seems to be a disconnect and almost sort of like an acceptance, a defeatism, a literal, almost a lack of drive, fire, passion. And it comes down to what we're going to move on to here. How come some communities with exactly the same situation can achieve and others cannot? What is it about, say, for instance, the Asian Chinese communities, and what is going on with the white British working class areas? Is it the deprivation? Is it the generational trauma? Is it the left behind legacy? Is it something to do with you're suggesting, which is the fact that I don't need to be in good education anyway? I'll just go and get a job. There's plenty of jobs out there. What's the point in education? That attitude passed down, because the thing is, my attitude was passed to me was, you are going to uni, son. You are getting the opportunity I never got. I was guilted into it, almost to a point where I didn't. I am letting the family down, and shame on me. And that's the strength of what I was driven towards education. It wasn't even negotiable. I would let the family down. I would be a failure. I would be not a person that they would want to be proud of. And it's funny when I get to parents, even when I look at the parents who I'm teaching the children, I can see that the parents that I see invested in their children's education take a very great pride in their children's success. On results day, the parents who take a pride in their success. You can see the schools today that are doing well, the progress rates are up there. They will say, we're really proud of those children. I'm always proud of the children that do well, and more so proud of those children that do well when I know I have a lot of barriers against them. Those are the kids that keep me in education, the working class kid that gets to Oxford and Cambridge. But that gap is getting too big. It's just getting harder, because it's getting harder to motivate. I don't know how everybody else feels. I just feel it's getting harder to motivate our children. I don't think they want it. I don't think they care. I don't think that the people who are sending them into school are more likely now to tell me I'm not doing a good enough job educating their own child. They're more enough telling me that curriculum is boring. They're more enough telling me that I'm not good enough to teach their children, where they take zero responsibility for their children's outcomes. They're more likely to send an email and complain rather than an email of support. That's where I think we're at. So you'd agree or disagree with me. It's something I'm getting a little bit sort of frustrated about being an educator, because I'm constantly feeling, why am I the one working 10 times harder than the child, and sometimes working 10 times harder than the government? Why am I the one busting a gut?
Yeah.
Why am I busting my gut for people who sometimes just don't give a monkey?
Okay.
Why should I bust a gut sometimes when literally I want it more than they do?
Okay, to give you a chance just to give a deep breath, Brent, to lower your blood pressure a little bit. So
No, but it's just frustrating. It's so
we've
frustrating.
just had a message from Paul, a kind of regular contributor to the show. So good evening, Paul. Shore starts were great, but started in 1999. There are fewer short start centres, but there are still some available apparently in some areas. So that's nice to see that maybe some communities are still keeping that going. My gut says, though, that they're probably falling more into the kind of voluntary sector or charitable status, than actual kind of a government society-led kind of policy on this. I think that's the difference is that if the whole society is behind that age group and supporting sometimes very young and vulnerable parents actually get off to the best starts. And we've gone through this evidence before, we don't need to do it again. That the more you can do at an earlier age, the better. And getting it to the point where a child hits reception without some kind of these core life skills is obviously hugely detrimental and sets them back kind of massively. And that includes things like, as Brent already says, things like the libraries that have closed down locally, because that has a massive impact on literacy levels. And obviously we know that literacy levels have all sorts of implications, particularly on things like crime later on in life as well. There's been lots of research because of the problems in British prisons this week about kind of the amount of prisoners that are in there that have very low literacy levels. And I don't have the evidence, but my feeling or my opinion is that is caused by issues at an earlier age, not having access to materials and not having access to support around literacy. And I know that my children had a wonderful time at the local library, and that kind of then gave them that that love of reading and the love of that kind of space around literacy and stories and that type of thing. And that's something we then as parents could build on at home, and then that took them into, by the time they went to nursery and into the early years setting, they were already at that stage. But some of that was cultural capital, but it also was the society around them that encouraged once, twice a week for them to be in a library space, which they kind of have a very fond memory of. So that's also kind of that kind of movement of society into pushing more things onto the individual only works if the individual themselves knows how to actually foster and do it themselves. Otherwise, unfortunately, as we're seeing, more and more children just get left behind and don't have that same start. It's 8 o'clock, Brent.
Talking of
Yep.
library, we've actually got a library which is John Catt Educational, which is our sponsor.
What
So
a wonderful segue.
this show's bought in partnership with John Catt. We're back to John Catt, and they're publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools. We've had them before as a sponsor. They're absolutely fantastic. They've got really good back catalog and always up to date titles as well. So please check out their latest releases. You can also use the code JESSIE TTR2324 for 20% off your order. So that's code JESSIE TTR2324 for 20% off your order. So please don't miss out on that. And you can find them at johncattbookshop.com. That's JOHNCATT bookshop.com. And please explore the full range of titles and to advance your own CPD today, which is happy reading. And CPD is important because I give a big shout out to you during the week when Tom pulled up and says, well, were you ever thinking of leaving education? And I will confess that about 10 years into my career, 10, 11 years into my career, I thought I'd reached that point where I was done with it in a sense, and was having a bit of difficulties, and just did a punt of going for some professional development in a master's degree through the school next door. And through the school next door, I met Adam and a couple of other good teachers as well. And that, I'd be honest with you, that master's saved my career in a sense, and always got me re-loving education because it just gave me that sort of that CPD that I needed at the right time. And that can be the saving grace sometimes. Same when you try a new school and you go to a new school, you discover a new set of colleagues, sometimes CPD or even, educational books. And for me, it was reading Carol Dweck, the Self-Fulfilling Prophecy, which I still now would realize that a lot of my educational philosophy is built. It's good when you sort of discover that what you're doing in the classroom is based upon some philosophy that seemed natural to you, but actually you do fit into a certain ideology of a certain type of teacher. And I think it was when I read Carol Dweck, those 10 to 12, 11 years ago with Adam, that sort of changed my mind. So please, by all means, please check out John Catt Educational Publishing, because there might be something in there that might reinvigorate your teaching practice. And of course, that's the thing with us teachers. We're always constantly evaluating, reassessing, evolving. There's no other profession like this that actually pushes you to the point where when you think you've got this sort of sorted, society changes, something else changes. And I do sometimes accept some of the changes, but then I also think sometimes you don't have to. Socrates was still doing his thing, and Socratic method still works, As I said to once, I work in a Catholic school, and somebody was saying, where's my teaching plan? And I once turned around and went, well, our Lord Jesus was up in the Sermon on the Mount. He didn't need a teaching plan when he fed 5,000 people. Yeah. It didn't get me very far, but I'm still sticking to that. Some of the greatest teachers have never had to do a 2-hour lesson plan when you do your teacher training.
I do find it interesting how often kind of Socrates comes up in kind of just general debate. We were watching something the other week about technology, so we're doing something about the Internet of Things in the lesson, and one of the lectures we were watching, someone was saying about that technology needs to be interweaved in everything, therefore it becomes kind of invisible, and the worry about technology, and the Socrates famously said about kind of his concern was around books and literature, and actually that would kind of stop people memorizing things. It's kind of just interesting, isn't it, that we're talking about kind of AI sometimes, and the worry is that, but people are worried about books and at one point, and I guess print after that, and the way things go. But yeah.
Well, I worry. Here's a follow up on one of our stories last week, which was about robots taking over the classroom. Yeah. So for anybody who listened to last week, and of course you can listen to any of our broadcast back on the likes of Podbean and of course Spotify as well. So you can get any of the Teacher Talk Radio catalog on there as well. But this is an interesting one, and this is what worries me about as educators is, and as much as I get passionate about it, because I am a passionate individual, and I do unleash the passion in the kids in the classroom, and it's still fresh. and it comes from the place of wanting the best for them. That's where I get frustrated. But I don't know if an AI can get as passionate, because here we go. An AI robot was appointed as a principal teacher at a boarding school. So UK boarding school has appointed an AI robot named Abigail Bailey as its principal teacher. The robot, developed with expertise in machine learning and educational management, provides advice to the headmaster on various matters. I thought that was my job as a union rep, but there we go. The AI principal aims to support decision making and alleviate the loneliness often experienced by school leaders. So don't talk to your leadership team. Talk to the AI. The headmaster also plans to make the online robot available to state school head teachers. The school previously advertised for a head of AI and appointed another robot, Jamie Rainier. They're actually giving the AI robots names. They have an AI robot called Abigail Bailey and another one called Jamie Rainier to help, integrate technology into the curriculum. This is a whole new level stuff, isn't it? The school believe that collaboration with AI and robots is essential for students to adapt to the future. Exactly what you're saying, Adam. The introduction of the AI is not intended to replace teachers, okay, but to enhance their capabilities and provide the best education possible. So you're like, whoa, yeah. I'm no Luddite, but I don't want to be replaced by Jamie Rainier and Abigail Bailey, the AI principal. How's your career progression there at that school? I am up for promotion. Damn, the AI got in before me. So per person at that school's probably been looking at that assistant head or deputy head teacher's job for a long while, looking for promotion, and the AI is taking his job. I shouldn't laugh. I really shouldn't laugh. But that was in the Sunday Telegraph. That story was in the Sunday Telegraph.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I want to get back to the kind of core message, but I've been in a meeting today about AI as my job role, inverted commas, head of AI at school. Maybe I'm the bot. Maybe that's going to be the big discovery, that I am the bot in the school. And we're looking at kind of how actually AI can actually help us as teachers. We've talked before about kind of replacement. I think we've got to be, we've got. I always said this. We've got to be able to sell ourselves a little bit more and what we offer. We are irreplaceable in the school system. Our knowledge, our backgrounds, what you've just been said about John Catt, about the way we kind of develop ourselves, research, we're academics as well as teachers. That is really difficult to replace, and I think it's kind of highly unlikely. Surely in the kind of long to medium term, I can't see any kind of obvious replacement for the person in front of a group of kids in some respect. So I'm a bit more relaxed, certainly as a 43-year-old, anyway, that it's not going to have an impact.
Maybe I'm more cynical to understand how our free market economy works these days, and I'm a bit more historical in a sense of seeing how these patterns develop over time. That if you want to cut corners, you want to cut costs. The AI won't have sick pay, doesn't get maternity leave, won't go on strike for 6.5%. The history patterns do repeat themselves, but I do accept that we are in some ways more dispensable. Go back to our original news story though, but are we then not, and this is the thing, are we then not educators any longer, but facilitators? Are we now the person that brushes teeth rather than actually delivers the lesson? Here I'm going to go with this. We will be teachers, but our role as teachers won't be the role of teachers. We'll be a different type of teacher because the AI is doing a lot more. You see what I mean? What is the role for us in an AI future when the AI can do faster than we can? Are we just going to look after the children? Are we going to, much like the weavers of the people who used to hand loom back in the day before the Industrial Revolution, and then all of a sudden the power looms come in, and what you had was still workers in the factory. They worked in the factory, but they weren't making the stuff any longer. They were just putting the cotton in and cleaning up around. So you still had workers, but you weren't making the stuff. The machine was making the stuff, the same as the machine will be doing the learning for the children. But we'll be there to supervise and look after and feed them and brush their teeth. You see, that's what I worry about.
I understand that, but there is. it's probably not the right show. We probably can kind of do a whole kind of podcast on this, but there is
I think we will.
there
Yeah.
is a kind of an economic argument around this thing called the labour lump in terms of when progressive technologies come in and take jobs. That sometimes it's not those jobs are dispersed into society, and in some cases, people go on to do different, better things anyway because of the technology and the other environments that we then don't know are going to come about because of that technology. So it's not always kind of doom and gloom. I mean, there are obviously always kind of winners and losers in a system that has winners and losers, but
But connection is, and I suppose why I'm allowing it, it's not too much of a sort of tangent, because let's go to this story, and I think there is a connection between, we're talking about the left behind communities. So this report, and I think the left behind communities are only going to get left behind in the digital world, because there is. Let me put this story first as the example of where I'm going with this. Laptops and GCSE exams could disadvantage poor pupils. So laptops and GCSE exams could put poor pupils at an unfair disadvantage. Oh, as if they aren't already. And may not be suitable for certain subjects, warns the academic professor Robert Coe. The largest exam board in England, the AQA, has announced a timetable for introduction of digital exams starting in 2026. They assure that pen and paper assessments will still be included to maintain handwriting skills, as if they're the thing of the future. Professor Coe, a senior associate at the Education Endowment Foundation, said that everyone thinks it's inevitable and a good thing, and it's just really tricky to work in practice. When computers go wrong, it can be quite hard to fix. He added, I think there are concerns about equity and fairness, where familiarity with devices will be different among different groups. What we're really saying is the digital divide, aren't we? We saw it during the COVID, weren't we? Where we had to send laptops up to people to certain areas because they didn't have access to any computers. They have maybe a smartphone in the whole household if they're better. So here we have again that if you introduce digital learning and digital exams, that again, you're going to disadvantage people from disadvantaged backgrounds. So even in the world of the potential future, this gap that we're going to discuss here is going to be accentuated. And then we come to the current situation. White pupils fall behind their peers in education, the report. So the Educational Policy Institute think tank reveals that white pupils in England have fallen behind their classmates since the pandemic. The report said between 2019 and 2022, higher attaining ethnic groups have generally pulled further away from white British pupils across the education phases. So that's across all the education phases, whilst pupils from lower attaining ethnic groups have generally narrowed the gap, with the exception of white and black Caribbean pupils. The report found by the end of primary school, pupils of Chinese descent were 10.7 months, which is nearly a year, months ahead of white British pupils, and those of Indian descent were 8 months ahead. It added by the end of secondary, Chinese pupils were a full 2 years ahead of their white British classmates. That's phenomenal. The report also found the attainment gap between poorer pupils and their peers had widened in the same 2019 to 2022 period. It found that children classed as persistently disadvantaged are eligible for free school meals, so our free school meal kids, for at least 80% of the schooling, are more than a year behind their peers, and by the end of primary, almost 2 years behind the end of secondary school. That's absolutely unbelievable. That's a failure. If someone wants to talk about leveling up, here you go. There you have generations, and I'm not going to blame a single government for this. This is generational. This doesn't happen overnight, and I'll tell you why it doesn't happen overnight. I'm 20 years teaching. 21 years ago, I was doing my teacher training, and I remember a similar report when I started teaching. So this is nothing new, but what is new is the gap is getting wider, and something happened during COVID to accentuate that gap. And as I'm suggesting to you, we go digital and we move into AI, then you're going to see that gap even widening, because that school that has the AI deputy head, of course, is a private school. So they'll be embracing the technology. They've got the funding to embrace the technology. They've got the cultural capital. They'll get the digital jobs. While, what are we going to have? I feel like we're going to have a society of Eli and Morlocks if we keep this up, which is, that H.G. Wells, the ground dwellers and the surface dwellers. That's the way we're heading. Because if this continues, this pattern continues, it can only create bigger problems for social cohesion in our society. And as we say, it's not going to bring inward investment, because the type of employment we're going to have is the gig economy. And when you get automation coming in, these areas are going to be left behind even further. I really think, I don't understand why nobody is not doing something about this.
Yeah.
I really don't. I don't understand. I really can't understand why some social mobility. Where is the social mobility czars? Where are they? Where are the people who are talking about how leveling up could happen? Because this this is a huge number of people we're talking about. So you're talking about white working class British children. That's like 900,000 children they reckon.
Yeah.
Sorry, just had a news report. There you go. Well, put that open to the floor. I don't know how you guys feel about that, whether that's anecdotally in your area, you see that happening. I know in my own situation, it does back up what I've seen in my own sort of setting over the last 20 years. And it does, being a faith based school, I pull kids in from a wider catchment area than normal comprehensive. And I could see a massive difference between different areas and even postcodes and even different ethnicities. So I can tell you that doesn't surprise me in my own background in a school which is a comprehensive school, which is in the middle of two cities, which does pull kids in from an old industrial area and from leafy suburbs. And I can say that the gap, I can see that in my own classroom. I get the full cross section in my own classroom. And I see the gaps opening up even more so in the last, especially the last 5, 6, 7 years. There's definitely been not just before COVID. I think even before COVID, I start to see more gaps opening up, and I think COVID's just accentuated. And I think since that, I think it has got progressively worse, and I think that's feeding into behaviour. I think that's feeding into so many other things as well. Something going on, and I don't know what everybody else feels about it. So, to the floor, there was any thoughts about that? Is this because of attitude? Is it because of the postcode thing? Is it because of the industrialization? Is it because of generation? Now, just before I hand over to Adam, there is a government report from 2 years ago, which is interesting. And there is a Commons report which actually looked into this. And it was the MPs themselves, and this was published in June 2021, that said white working class pupils have been failed for decades for neglecting the English education system. And they said the statistics then that they have for then are actually got worse. But they had a list of things that they said was causing this: poor local jobs market, lack of opportunity, lack of community assets and social organisation, including poor local services and poor transport, families with multi-generational poverty. Interesting, that's your sink of states, isn't it? Disengaged parents with poor experience of education. That's interesting. It's I didn't do like school. You don't have to do well at school. I didn't do well at school. Don't worry about it. Using people premium funding to provide more support, they suggest, is one way out of it. Family hubs to get parents involved, attract teachers to areas that can struggle to retain staff. So here they are in 2021 saying attract teachers to areas that struggle to retain staff. Well, we're attracting, are we seeing people going into areas away from certain areas towards nicer areas? And I hate using the word nicer areas, but I'm going with that. The more difficult areas, the more difficult postcodes. Is there a teacher shortage in those areas, which is leading to some of this? And how do we get people into those areas? Ensure that work-related vocational education is available. Well, how's T levels worked out? And find a better way to talk about racial disparities. And that's the thing. Even I thought about, when I put this story together, I thought, am I okay to talk about this? I mean, you have to be careful, because how are we comfortable talking about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we were talking kind of earlier on in the week about our own backgrounds and, our own kind of. I was talking to you about my grandparents, and they both left school. They're both kind of working class. Maybe we'll discuss that word in a minute and what that means. But they were kind of working class, and they left school at they officially left school at 12, I think, or I think the actual cutoff was probably 14, but there certainly wasn't much secondary education at all. And it just got me thinking sometimes when I look at some of the students that we were teaching in that area that you were mentioning earlier, and a lot of the lads in particular, from the age of 13, went off to essentially just started working, and school became very much a secondary, thing for them to even think about. They weren't motivated by it. They kind of went to school because their parents were getting hassled, or their parents thought it might be a good idea to get a certain level of education. And it got me thinking that I wonder if, like my grandparents, that some working class people, students, feel that there is a certain level of education that is acceptable, and that is basically their primary school key stage 3 education, and anything else above the mandatory in terms of English and maths is not actually part of their motivating factors to be in education at all. So it's almost like there's an economic output that they see a value in being able to kind of read, write, and do mathematics, but actually to sit there and do a GCSE in geography, technology, computer science, business studies, etc., all 9, is that actually something that's worthwhile at all?
Yeah. Paul is. I think Paul wants to speak. Are you there, Paul?
How are you doing, gentlemen? How are you?
I'm not too bad. I think you're a good one for this because I know we've spoken before. You've got you've got your finger on that type of area. I mean, I know
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I mean, you're gonna like this. My grandfather was born in Brutal Bootle. I never told you that, Paul.
Oh God, really?
But he's born in the workhouse. So my grandfather was born in West Derby, which is one of
Christ
the reasons why
Almighty.
I'm a red. I know. I'm sorry, but yeah, my family were back and forward between the northwest. Actually, grandma was born in Fleetwood, and they were really working class Irish, back and forward between the north of Ireland and then back over to England, back and forward. So I've got family in Wigan. So I've always had this affinity with the northwest and knowing that strong connection between the Irish in the northwest, but I've also had that affinity with Liverpool, and I know Liverpool is one of those areas that social deprivation has. Back in the 80s, there was a certain individual who said, let's put the place to ruin. And I've always had that very strong affinity and to stand up for people in Liverpool because it is one of those areas, isn't it, which
Yeah,
basically suffers from this,
especially
doesn't it?
Bootle.
Brutal Bootle, wasn't it? That's what it was
Brutal,
called.
Bootle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I used to drive up to me grandparents. My grandmother was Irish, and we had to drive through Bootle to get to their house. So it was one of them where you just went a bit over the speed limit and made sure all the windows were shut and didn't slow down too much. So good on him, to be fair. I was can I start with an AI story first?
Oh, far away.
Brilliant, because my daughter came home today, and she always says what happened at school, and I always ask her the same. And because she's got a father as a teacher for years, she knows a lot of sort of the workings of school and all the stories behind and stuff. And they had their English today, and their English teacher had asked them to do a piece of work, and he'd marked it all and everything else. And she said that he spent the last 15 minutes of the lesson basically berating the rest of the class, but applauding this one lad who had obviously worked so hard to improve himself over the last week where the homework had been given, saying that people weren't using this phrase or that phrase. But this lad had listened and he put it in. You should all be like him. You should put in the effort and produce writing like this. Now go away and think about it. And they went out of the classroom and the lads up to them all and said, yeah, that's ChatGCP, lads.
You've got to say, fair play. That's intelligence, isn't it?
Isn't it? Isn't it
Well,
just so when the whole class, I tell you what, when the whole class in the next assignment produce his writing where it might actually be the same, his face would be an absolute picture, I think. Absolutely.
My kid's going to go with the whole works of Shakespeare or something, aren't they? Just read.
But the thing is, we'll always have this gap. I mean, I remember when Wikipedia came in, I had my kids writing essays back in the day when they actually were allowed to write an essay. Now it's chunked down to the point where it's like, well done, you wrote 5 lines. How things have changed, they really have sort of like, they have no longevity, our children, weirdly. But back in the day when I got them to write an essay, I'd give them, a week or so to write an essay, a university style on Napoleon. I went and changed the Napoleon article in Wikipedia and inserted some mistakes in it. And of course, this parent didn't like me. I think there was a little bit of didn't like some of my opinions. And they consisted, no, that I supervised my child doing that homework. My child didn't copy it. So I had the parent in and says, see this Wikipedia article, I put the mistakes into it. And the parent went, how dare you? You're trying to... I says, well, they do that at university. They'd be chucked out of university. My job is to prepare your child for the future. And by the way, how could I tell? There's no way in God's green earth that they could write that information But that was Wikipedia, but it's evolved, hasn't it? Now we've got Wikipedia a mile away. But and kids are always going to take cut corners. They're always going to try it on. But in itself, you have to applaud the ingenuity and I suppose the initiative of being able to do that. And that shows the level of intelligence to be able to find a workaround. And that's what kids are brilliant at, aren't they? That's where they're intuitive. I think that's when they're at their best, aren't they?
Absolutely. I think that class are well into their ChatGTP or TeachMate now and just know AI for the future. Absolutely. But what you were saying about ethnic sort of achievement and everything else, I've remembered even when I was in school, late 80s, early 90s, and we had children from Chinese families. They were always the brightest kids. Do you know what I mean? It was a sheer work ethic from them. And I've seen that throughout. I've seen that through my daughter going into high school. She's had that. There's a Chinese family who, I mean, the kids play an instrument. They top set in every subject. They just have a really strong work ethic to be able to achieve in all these things. And even now in the class that I've mentioned before, where I've got 8 Polish children, Arabic children. We've recently had some people come over from Ghana and Nigeria. They see being able to come to school as a privilege. That's how they act. I'm so glad we're here. The parents are so glad that they're here and
they're
able
always
to do
very
it.
thankful and grateful for everything you do.
Yeah,
as well, aren't they?
oh, massively. And I mean, even the first day when this Nigerian family have recently arrived, the father was just so appreciative to me. And the thing was, it was just the first time I'd met him, and the child has only been in school a week, and they were just so happy to be here. Whereas you've got children who maybe get a different message for whatever reason. And we're literally trying to drag them through the door and then drag them through the lesson to be able to hold on to this information that we're meant to store in their little heads.
Yeah, and I'm exactly the same. You mean I've got a new arrival from Ghana, and English is not brilliant, but at the same time, smiling, happy. And I was saying, well, how you find the school? They've adjusted so quick and appreciate everything. They couldn't believe, and it's interesting. They couldn't believe I give them a pen, or if they needed it. Couldn't believe I was giving kids pens. Couldn't believe they got an exercise book for free. There's little things that they couldn't believe. Couldn't believe that I was so amenable, willing to help them. And the GCSE class, is one of the students gone straight into the GCSE class, and I have 15 kids in there, and they couldn't believe it's 15 kids in the class rather than 50 kids in the class.
Yeah.
So there was a really fantastic sort of buzz you get from some of these children, and again, Hong Kong children. I went to school with a boy who was sent to Adam during the week about this, and we had at my grammar school. I went to sixth form. It was a grammar school, but it was basically Northern Ireland, the 11 plus. So it was a very different system. So it's more about ability. But I got my GCSEs, went to the grammar school, and there was three students, Hong Kong students. And we didn't know this at the time, but they actually worked in the restaurant as a part of their upkeep. But they were sent over to get an education, and somehow they ended up on the border of Northern Ireland in the 1990s at a Catholic boys' grammar school. And we didn't realise that Brian Fung, as he was, because they all got Irish names, which was because nobody would take the time to pronounce the names. They said, right, well, that's Brian, and it was, they actually got to choose the names they wanted as well. So Brian was always falling asleep in a common room while we were basically eating pot noodles and doing nothing, meant to be studying. And Brian would either be studying or falling asleep until we realised the guy was working 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning in the restaurant, getting 3 or 4 hours sleep, and he turned out to be one of the top chemistry students in the world. And they were just so driven, so motivated, so desirous, single-minded, focused on achievement and the pride of achievement, and it was phenomenal to watch. And it is always phenomenal to watch when you see the drive and the motivation coming from certain families. Too much sometimes, actually, where I've had to turn around to some parents and say, your child is just needs to maybe chill a little bit and have some social skills and some time out. So there is that aspect as well, isn't it, where people can be so focused in education, too focused in education, and not developing the other aspect, the softer skills as well. And I think you need the balance of the both, don't you? You kind of need to be able to do both. And I was speaking to a parent last night and their child's come up with GCSEs and they're in a relationship, and the mother was straight away going, not a chance. I want that relationship finished. She needs to focus. She's too young on her education. And I'm thinking, she's 16 now. She likes this boy. And what can you say? The parent is adamant that this is getting in the way of her education, and the education is the most important thing. And I'm her teacher thinking, actually, she probably needs the distraction a little bit, because I can imagine she's doing 4 or 5 hours a night. And it's difficult to navigate that other side of it, where people are almost too pushy to a point where I think it can actually sometimes cause a little bit of damage in the sense of expectations. I know it with me, it did, because if the pride thing and you can push people too far and stress them out too much and put too much pressure on them, and that can be the other, that can flip the other way as well. There's always the Goldilocks, isn't it, where you want enough pressure, enough, not stress, but you need enough motivation, but not too hot, not too cold. And as a parent, God, it is difficult, because I have that in my own child. They have their SATs, and I'm thinking, I want them to do well, but I don't want them to do well at a cost. It shouldn't come at a cost. It's got to be balanced, doesn't it?
Is it that too many working class, inverted commas, working class children are motivated for the wrong reasons, and there's not a kind of internal motivation or to education or something they want to strive towards for the love of learning? Is that not there? So therefore, wouldn't you take away some of those external kind of motivators? They kind of just check out.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. I mean, because I look at my own, and I had a very broad education in the primary school where I just enjoyed nature walks.
Yeah.
I enjoyed my primary school curriculum. And funny, I was asking my daughter recently, what does she enjoy about school? She's not enjoying the English and maths. It's too forced. It's too sort of pushed on. Whereas she is actually enjoying the arts and the crafts. She's enjoying the PE. She's enjoying the geography and history, funny enough. Because maybe that's me, because I'm a geography and history teacher, so maybe that's partly myself. But her mother is proficient. She's a psychologist, very, very good at maths. And it's actually really annoying my wife that why is my daughter not like maths? I loved maths when I was a child. And I'm going, well, when you did maths as a child, you weren't under the same pressure. You didn't have SATs to do. So there may be something in that where maybe, as you said, if somebody's behind and somebody feels like they're behind, maybe they've given up early. It's that back, it's that kind of like, why bother trying if I'm never going to win type scenario. And in our education system, there's a definite feeling of winners and losers. And if you feel as if what you're going to do, you're never going to win, so why bother? I'll concentrate, as you say, I'll concentrate on things I can win at.
That's right. What I'm good at. So my close kind of cultural network is good at doing this. They're good at kind of giving themselves an income, a purpose around a particular field, and it's all set up ready for me. Or I can go to this thing here that I don't feel like I can succeed in. I don't feel there's an outcome there that I want. So why do I need to be in that outcome? Why do I need to kind of push myself to it? Just while we ponder that, Brent, it's coming up to 8:30. I'll just say a quick hello to John Catt Educational, our sponsor for tonight.
Indeed.
It's publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. You have to check out the latest releases, and you can do that. We can offer a good code tonight, Brent. If you use the code JCTTR 2324, you can get 20% off an order. So please, we've got a whole library of John Catt's educational books in our school, and they're a good, useful tool for us to go to every so often and top up on our CPD. Some of them, I've got a Rosenshine's Principles book that's quite good. It's kind of a little handbook that's a John Catt educational book that I kind of go to every so often, because sometimes they can be quite good, concise books that you can quickly visit. So I've definitely used them. So visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
So, question for Paul. I mean, you work in the early years. Do you see that what we're describing forming early on, the kind of disengagement of not bothered versus bothered, the competition, the motivation, does it start to happen at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old? Does it sort of start at primary? And do you see that developing, that gap from the early doors? And then obviously from a primary point of view, do you think then the way to fix this is you've got to get it early? If you get it early, you might give these kids a chance of feeling as they've got some chance of success, and because that gap at primary only seems to get wider at secondary. And I come in at secondary trying to close the gap, and it's probably, not saying too late, but it's a harder gap to close then. So what do you see that gap at primary then, or is it a smaller gap then, or develops into a bigger gap?
Yeah, I must say this comment about 50 times a year to just colleagues and stuff, and it's through no sort of particular report or anything else, and someone might say I'm wrong based on findings, but I just believe that whatever you do in that first 5 year of that child's life is absolutely vital moving forward. And I'm talking about the whole thing. I'm talking about a basic, you're talking about brushing the teeth and stuff, just basic hygiene, basic skills, brushing teeth, eating food. I mean, and the thing is then, I'm usually saying it because as a 6-year-old or a 5 or 6-year-old, they've then got major problems where they've not learned the word no. I've found that, or I believe that it's a lot of parents who don't want the conflict with the child. They want the easy life, the nice sort of times to do this, that, and the other. And then when the child goes into school and they've got to follow a routine, a set of rules, they've got to conform, they absolutely lose it. And it's because they've never had to follow that kind of thing before. And it's obviously it's more in school because there's rules to walk where and do this and get that, but that you've got to teach a child that. And I feel it's neglect, in the other way, because it's if you're not actually preparing your child for going into school and spending most of their time without you, but with a load of other children and an adult they're only met for the first time. If you're not preparing them for that, then that's on you as a parent. You've got to be able to build them up and give them experiences so they don't absolutely, lose everything in school and kick off and act this way and that way because they can't cope with a structure and being told, no, you can't do that because here we do this, and it's just ongoing.
And sort of then you have to almost reboot them then in that sense of you've got, and that's what I think during COVID we've had it, because we have it in secondary school where it's like, why can't I go to the toilet? Why can't I go to the toilet? I go to the toilet when I want. I do what I want. And you're like, no, you don't. You can't. No, you can't. And some parents support that idea of like, wow, that's ridiculous. When I was this good. And I think that thing that the Cummins said is true. If parents have had a negative experience of school, they're more likely to be less supportive of school. If they've been educationally successful through school, they're more likely to be supportive of school. If they have a bit of a bee in their butt of like, oh, well, they don't value education, don't value the school, and the child has to go to school, there's that element of it. I think it's like the holiday thing, isn't it? Where, I'm taking my child out for a holiday. I can do my education better than school. I devalue school. And I don't know whether the government have given that subliminal message by underfunding schools, not sorting out schools. There's a definite feeling I get, an undercurrent, I think, within the country of education is not as important as it used to be. And there's almost an undermining of, well, when the teacher tells you do that, don't you worry, I'll back you up, I'll write you a letter. You can have your hair whatever way you want. I can be your best mate. Here, look, you go off and sort yourself out with that technology over there, 4-year-old. And I know that's a stereotype, but the stereotype's starting to bear a lot of fruit is what we're really saying, isn't it? That these stereotypes are starting to become quite the norm.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing has been technology, and I'm a total advocate for it. I think it can be used in so many fantastic ways. The world is completely different now as it was even 5-10 years ago. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to 25 years ago. But the downside of it is that children are sucked in on screen time, and if they spend most of their time, particularly in the first 5 years, literally 5 centimeters away from a screen for most of the day, they are not going to appreciate anything else. And it's their blanket. It's their blanket. It's their security blanket. And it's the security blanket, if you like, of the parent as well. Oh, I've got to do this, or I want to watch that, or I want to do this, or, oh, they're kicking off about that. Give them the iPad. Just give them the iPad. And the thing is then, when they get into school and technology is available there, they just see it as, all right, now I can play. You know what I mean? There's no sort of drive, like you said before. There's no drive to achieve whatever the lesson's about.
I do think, though, I mean, it's interesting. We mentioned this last week, Paul, that one of my worries is that some children's first relationship with education is through the screen because of COVID. And they have been brought up in that world. And I think it's a huge challenge because of the nature of the technology for teachers and schools to try and claw that back. I'm not being defeatist in that. I think kind of there does have to be policy, and we do have to try and think about a way to do it. But I don't think there's any real policy anywhere at the minute, apart from banning them or taking them off children, to actually how we work with children to kind of ease them back into a different type of education that could be more beneficial for them in the future and for their well-being.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is as well, we aren't with the children between 1 and 5.
That's right.
And it's everything that's just planted and integrated into them. And then we almost have got to spend the next few years sort of scraping away all of that and try and get them in a mindset where they're going to achieve, I suppose, And the thing is that a lot of parents, when they say, oh, well, why can't they do that? Or why can't they do this? Or they're not like that at home, or, all that sort of stuff. It's because we're starting on a minus.
That's right, yes. It's a different world they're coming into, isn't it? It's a completely different world. We're kind of advocating something that's moved on. And I'll just put it from a pupil's point of view. I mean, even my kids who will engage very much with education, they still come back and they say, well, why, I could have done this much easier on my phone today, but the teacher said I couldn't get my phone out. So therefore, I had to kind of do this long-winded process to get in. And I know why the teacher's done that, because potentially if he lets everyone go on their phone, then there's a kind of a potential behavior issue, or somebody misuses the phone, and then it opens a can of worms with lots of other things. But there's got to be some way of kind of, this is what I was talking about last week with AI and technology more generally. We do have to find a way to work with it, rather than just say it's a kind of, your phone gets dropped off at the door, when that's completely an alien world to all these kids. And it's really difficult, I think, for our generation and even generations older than us to kind of really appreciate that. And we bring that bias in, don't we? Of, like Brent said, the world that we had, and it's just not appropriate, I think, for us to kind of try and force our world onto a group of kids who just don't have that world. We can moan about it, and we can say that we wish it could be like this, but the reality is that because of a situation, because of COVID, those children are in a position where they have been on a device for a long period of time, and it is their primary relationship with education. And I just think, kind of, as a school body, as teachers, parents, and everyone somewhere, and school leaders and policymakers, there hasn't really been much thought put into that about what happens when they just go back into school, and we just say, well, actually, we don't want the phone here, we don't want the technology here. But then that causes a huge, problem, behaviourally, I think, in a child, because they are potentially, unfortunately, addicted to it. Because
So then, going back to the different groups, then we're sort of suggesting that not only that these different groups, that would be one of the differences. Then that these people from the other ethnic minorities, their parents wouldn't tolerate them having that technology for that time. Their parents would be stricter on them. Their parents would be
possibly, or it
more
could be
disciplined, more
well,
driven towards more regulation, more control.
it could be, or it could just be a cultural thing. So I know that a lot of my pupils, for example, in the evening, because it's a Muslim community, it's about the mosque praying and that community in the evening.
Yeah.
So actually, there isn't a great deal of mobile phone use in that community. Whereas I look at my own kids, and I'm watching them now, kind of because my wife's got out. I'm trying to keep hold of them as they're playing up in the living room now. But there isn't really anything for them to do now, apart from watch telly or go on their phones. And that when we were young, as you said, we did go out to clubs, we did go to activities. There were things that we could access, and although I did have a very kind of inverted commas middle class background, those things weren't expensive that I was doing.
No, I had a youth club. I had a local youth club. I
Yeah,
had the church. I went to church every Sunday.
yeah, yeah.
We had community, is what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, that's right. So there was a bigger sense of community, and also there would be a group of us that would be happy just playing out in the street till like 7 o'clock,
Yeah.
7:30.
Well, there was that too. We used to do that with curbsies. We used to do that with running around, exploring the area. There was the fact that education at school didn't stop at school. I felt we were learning more about the world. Even now, I'm a very unusual situation because geopolitically, I cut my teeth as a 5 and 6 year old when I started learning about the world, because every time I used to watch the news, and I sort of thought of that recently. I grew up at the dinner table watching the news and the miners' strike. I remember one of my first childhood memories was my dad spitting his dinner out when the General Belgrano was sunk by Thatcher, and I think I was 4 or 5 years old. That's phenomenal exposure to the world. I knew who Yasser Arafat was when I was about 6 years old. I knew talk about this Israel and Palestine situation. I think the Palestinian flag and the ANC flag was flying outside our house. Now, it wasn't put there by us; it was put there by some of the local youths. So my world was kind of connected to the world. I watched documentaries. I watched, Attenborough. Every Sunday, I'd watch Attenborough's mum. Mum would call me downstairs in the middle of my homework and go, "The wildebeest are getting it, son." And I'm going, "Oh, yeah, it's the wildebeest always getting hammered by the hyenas. Who is it this week? Is it the lions?" And that was the thing, the interactions. I had more social interactions with my cousins, with my family, with my grandparents, more social interactions with my siblings, so more social interactions with people in my community, people around me, more watching the likes of the news, connected to the world. Our kids are in Command Center 101, aka bedroom, and they are looking at lots of stuff, but they're looking at stuff that's actually, I won't say it's educational. And I'll give you the example. I've started teaching computers now at year 7, which is non-specialist. It's interesting teaching computers because one of the first things I thought, here's these new computers, and I said this last week, I had kids today didn't know how to switch the computer on. My mouse is not working, and because they don't know how to use a mouse, I have to show them how to use a mouse. And I'm going, what is going on? These are 11-year-old children. This is the digital kids. These are children of this generation. And then I realize they're all iPad. They're all iPad. They're all touchscreens. They're all voice command. They don't know how to use a PC. And I was then showing them how to do a rudimentary PowerPoint about how to create a logo. Very basic stuff. They couldn't log in. They couldn't remember their login details. They couldn't activate the product. They could, and I'm going, these are the children who are digital natives. What is going on here? And this is the thing, they are in certain aspects, but in other aspects, they're not. They are very, if they were presented a problem, like the mouse wasn't working, if I was their age, I'd figure it out. I'd poke around. I'd go, oh, how's the mouse not working? Let's have a look behind it. They are so waiting for instructions. I think, unfortunately, the way they learn now, it's so rote and so sort of, so chunked down and so everybody has to get it. I think the challenge is gone out. And we even have to do in lessons now where you go, oh, here's the challenge question coming up. Here's the challenging part. And you're like, really? You know what I mean? We even have to try and go, here's a deeper thinking question for you. We even have to highlight, please highlight the deeper thinking question. So I'm asking you a deeper thinking question. Everything's so scripted, so forced, so unorganic. And I think learning's become that in school. Maybe some of this is our children are bored. Maybe what they're getting outside school is more entertaining to them. Maybe we just can't compete any longer with the outside world, and school is just like, oh God, what'd you get at school? The meals are terrible. The teachers are all disconnected from us, and I want to be home. I say that to the kids, what would you be doing during a half term? When I was their age during a half term, I'd be studying, I'd be working, I'd be out playing football. They're on EA 24, 12 hours a day in their bedrooms.
This is interesting because this has just come up on test this evening, Brent, about persistent absence or severe absence. The number of pupils who missed 50% or more half-day sessions in autumn and spring term has increased by a quarter last year. Data shows. So this is incredible. In 2018, it was 57,167. And 2022 to 23, any ideas? Can we guess?
No idea.
138,905 pupils missing, more than 50% or more sessions. So this is that question, isn't it? Like, I wonder if you delved into that
if you
data.
Cross-reference the attendance data with the ethnicity data, would you find a correlation?
How many of those students are those disadvantaged, white, working class children that we are talking about?
Anecdotally, in my own background, absolutely, I would back that up. I would definitely bear that out.
Because we do know what there is strong evidence, isn't there? And it kind of sounds right anecdotally as well, isn't it? The more school you miss, the worse the outcome is at the end in terms of grades. That could be answering that question.
We calculated 5% from anybody chronically below 95, 85 to 95%. We calculated was a grade. So if attendance was below 90%, 80 to 90% it was. So a child with 80 to 90% attendance versus a child with 95% attendance, we found was a great difference in our school setting across the board on average. So that's a full grade difference. And then the thing is, you take that though. You take a child with say 90% attendance. 90% attendance at the end of their GCSEs would be nearly well over a year and a quarter of their actual time at school. Now you take those figures about the gaps there, those attainment gaps. That has got to be one of the issues about how low attendance is getting, and also the number of children disappearing into the system. County lines, oh my word, we are losing so many children, and they are the most vulnerable children. And I think a lot, going back to Paul's, I meant to say that earlier. Go back to what Paul said between the age of 1 to 5. I think the bad habit starts there. I think the excuse making starts there because some of the parents. I mean, it's so obvious. I stood up and I took attendance over a couple of years ago in my school, and I got in trouble for it. I don't care about it. I said it, and I actually took the kids into the hall and says, "No more duvet days. And if your parents are thinking of sending me letters in to say that you are not well and you're not well, well, I'm not taking it. I'm not having it because that's lying. And if your parents want to lie to us and they want to tell us that you're not well when you are well, then that's not acceptable." And I've had situations where parents lie to you and go, "My child's not well," and then they're spotted downtown shopping, and you're like, you were lying to your school and telling your child they're meant to be in school. What are you saying to me? How can you trust people when they're going to turn around and take their kid out of school and lie about it? What do they what value are they teaching their child? By the way, you go to school and I want you to go to school. And then the child turns around and goes, "I'm not feeling very well." Well, they're not feeling very well. All the time I hear kids saying that child, he's at home, he's on his Xbox. There's nothing wrong with him, sir. And that's enabled by a parent who's just, "Oh, you're not very well. Oh, what's wrong with you? Oh, you take the day off here." Kid laughs his head off because he's sitting there for the next couple of days with his headphones on, with another kid who's got his headphones on. And that's happening a lot. There's no doubt about that. I noticed attendance rates when EA 24 was released. Oh, yeah, there's a couple of kids off school. Now, you take that nationally. Who are these children? Because I don't think they're going to be the children from backgrounds where their parents are pretty much, not allowing them. Take China. I mean, TikTok is banned in China after a certain thing. And I'm not saying we should be that draconian. I think that's the wrong thing to do. However, they understand the danger of things like that, and they completely cut it off because they want their kids to be focused on their education. Let's go back to that parent I had last night. A parent's even saying, "I want my child to be focused on their education, not focused on falling in love with 15 or 16-year-old. Who am I to say that parent, that's that parent's child, that's that parent's child's responsibility? I admire them for their dedication. I think, they've got to be careful, and I did hint at that. Don't push too hard. We'll manage that. We'll keep an eye and make sure that they're okay, because I'm worried about stress levels for a child like that. But at the same time, that parent is focused, driven, motivated, and their child is focused, driven, motivated. And there's no way God's green earth they'd let their child lie in the bed on a duvet day and play Xbox or take them down shopping instead of going to school. That's where it is. And I think that's our problem. And with your attendance figures, those attendance figures are showing the pattern. If I take those two attendance figures and take the gap that's opening up in certain communities, I think we have one of the major factors. I mean, that's what my read of that would be. I don't know whether you think that would be it, Adam, or whether you'd agree with me, but I think that's a strong correlation. There's got to be a strong correlation.
Yeah. Well, obviously, we're all kind of trying to find the reasons, why, and it's not something that, as you said, it feels like something that was there right at the beginning of my career, and it's something that's never really been addressed. So it kind of poses the question: is anybody really looking into it, or kind of has an active policy to try and support these communities, or are they, just being left for I don't know what, for, again, from what Paul was saying and what we said earlier, to say why would you do it? Because we know that the outcomes for for society, economically, health. We talked before about Venn diagrams. All these things are interlinked. For me, the link this week with the prisons is the key. Those maybe some of those pupils who are left behind, low literacy levels, well, undiagnosed SEN. All these things then potentially can equal, a potential outcome of prison.
But can you imagine, and Paul's got to come in this, can you imagine that those areas that have to pay out more money on mental health services are the areas where there is more deprivation? That actually filters back into it. They increase the crime. There's more mental health services needed. There's no money, more investment needed. People don't go into areas of crime. It all becomes a cyclical thing, like a downward economic spiral. We call it the negative multiplier effect. Your school's not doing well, your pupils don't have confidence, they're more likely to turn to crime, county lines comes in, and the whole thing goes in a downward spiral. Paul, you're going to come in on that?
So Brent, just one thing, just a quick note to say you got 4 minutes, and we want to say hello to John Catt just at the end as well.
Yeah, fire away, Paul.
I was just going to say, if you sort of compare last 15 years, say, where schools were, education, all that, and schools there was expectations of parents by schools, and because schools were, I don't know if revered is probably maybe too strong a word, but they were certainly labelled as important by the government and everything else. And so there were expectations made of parents, made of children, and those were expected to be met. And then basically what's happened, certainly over the last 15 years, more probably, is that's completely swung the other way. Because every day it was like, schools aren't doing this, teachers aren't doing that, blah, blah, blah. And, kids aren't getting this, kids aren't getting that. And so it's almost a total reversal now, where actually there's parents' expectations of schools, and those expectations are growing. And at the moment, there's no way of seeing that curbing at all. So going back to sort of initial brushing the teeth and toilet training the kids almost in some respects, it's this list of things now that schools are supposed to be expected to do is growing and growing and growing, and I hope it curbs off soon. Otherwise it might be an AI teacher who's teaching them to brush their teeth.
Lovely way you finished that off. Perfect, Paul, and you've kind of summed up everything brilliantly. Right.
Actually, Paul, I will say that is, in a nutshell, pretty much exactly the hypothesis, because I think you're right with 97. That there was that education mantra. Education was seen, and you saw the policies, and you saw the new Labour government really push and motivate, get to university, almost like I rode the crest of the wave of that. I was one of that generation, and here I am as a working class kid, more socially mobile. My problem is looking behind me at somebody like me, the equivalent, won't get the same opportunities and life chances and social mobility. And I think that is, in a country that's meant to be a meritocracy, I think that's a national disgrace. In a country that prides itself on, if you work hard and do your best, you will succeed. the British dream, the American dream version of the British dream of work hard, do your best. It's not fair any longer, because for some children it doesn't. They aren't going to succeed because just by accident of birth, by postcode, by life chances, it isn't just fair. And you're right about the first couple of years. I meant to say it earlier on. I think you're absolutely spot on. Those first couple of years are so vital, especially when we know about the likes of attachment disorder as well, which is a whole different conversation.
Yeah, don't start this
on
podcast.
John. Yeah. So thanks, Paul, for everything tonight. I was really, I'm glad you piped in, because I was really hoping that you would, because obviously you give the primary school. We've got the 3 stages of education there. Obviously, we're sponsored by John Cat Education. John Cat Education is a fantastic publisher of CPD and bookstores. I've actually shut down my thing, so I might need our host to give me the code, because I've actually literally, my computer's just run out of battery, so I've lost my my code. But John Cat Education is our sponsor. They have been our sponsor before, and they have a absolutely fantastic back catalogue of materials that you want to listen back to for your CPD. You'll find them at johncatbookshop.com, and they're fantastic for that. So sorry, I've just basically shut everything down.
I've got it here. It's JCTTR2324 for 20% off your orders. Don't miss out.
Fantastic. And we are at 9 o'clock, as promised, Tom HB.
So we started on time and finished on time.
Yes. We've got no show over on the other side. I think Paul Hazard's off at the moment, so there's no show over on the other channel, as you don't get your double dose of Northern Irish, as we say, Northern Ireland. So yes, and of course you can listen back to us where you get your Spotify and your podcasts as well, and Podbean as well. So don't forget, you can also be a host if you feel like becoming one of us and taking over. And I'm just so determined to stay to 9 o'clock before Tom HB is going to go. He's counting down the seconds. Thank you, and good night.
Good night. Goodbye.
Thanks, Paul, as well. Again.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.